Social Impact CX, the podcast that helps you drive mission and make a difference with customer experience.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for the Social Impact CX podcast. I'm John Corrigan, and I'll be your guide to how you can drive mission and achieve social impact with customer experience work. This is episode 13 of Social Impact CX, and again, thanks for listening. Today, I'm grateful for not only everyone listening to this podcast, but especially for the leadership of customer experience experts at organizations such as Forrester and others as well. The professionals at these organizations have truly blazed the trail in the world of customer experience work. And if you're working in a nonprofit or social impact organization, I'll tell you there's really a lot to learn from each of them. Even if you don't have the budget to purchase subscriptions to their services or to download every report or attend all their great events, by staying current with their areas of focus, you can learn a lot and gain an understanding of how to build your own customer experience work that's targeted on serving the people that you're trying to help. Even if you don't use the word customer and instead you're focused on beneficiaries or clients, patients, students, or others, this all applies. And there's been a lot of work out there that can help you find your way. And that brings us to the focus here of episode 13 of the Social Impact CX podcast, which is Voice of Customer or VOC programs. I think that a Voice of Customer program is really important, and that it's also, I think if you're working in a nonprofit or a social impact environment, it's important to slightly adjust your approach to Voice of Customer, because what you're most likely interested in is actually voice of the served. So instead of VOC, we're talking about voice of the served. Who are you trying to help? Who are you working to better serve? This is an important distinction. Voice of the customer is measuring what people purchasing a product or a service, what they think. That's great feedback to have if you are in a straight for-profit environment. But if you are not necessarily arriving at the office every day to sell something, and your focus is instead delivering a service or product or whatever experience that's intended to help someone, then what you want to be listening for and why you're listening will likely be somewhat different, and that's okay. That's why we're here at Social Impact CX. What is most important is that you take the concepts and disciplines found in developing a strong voice of customer program and then translate these ideas to the scenario of measuring the voice of the served, the people that you're working to help. Now, if you're starting out with a blank sheet of paper, taking it from the top with a voice of the served program, please realize this is a familiar theme here. Realize that once again, as we've talked about at Social Impact CX in regards to other elements of a customer experience program, there is no need to recreate the wheel. The guidelines on how to build a voice of the customer program are out there, and then thinking through how you'll translate that to a voice of the served program is pretty intuitive. I'll talk through a few of the basics here on how I'd suggest you approach building a voice of the served program, and touch on a few likely places where you'll find some good expertise. And then I'm going to wrap up this episode with previewing a bit of the content in development from my book due out in later 2018. It's called Mission is the Journey, and there will be a whole chapter in there dedicated to voice of the served. But let's start by covering some of the basics. All that a voice of the customer or voice of the served program is doing is measuring what's being said by the people that are most important to you. Once again, we're achieving that outside-in perspective. And by regularly and consistently measuring the voice of the people you're working to serve, you can better represent their needs as you do your work. And you can then help your colleagues as well better understand the needs of the people that you're working to serve. And so hopefully you can make better decisions as an organization and take actions based on what's most important to those people, so that you can be more effective in your work and help more, and because that's what this is all about. So starting with the basics in a voice of the served program, you're going to want to be able to measure consistently and with regular frequency. Once a year, it might not be enough, but whether it's twice a year or 4 times a year, quarterly, monthly, whatever that is, you should determine what's meaningful and effective for your organization. And so you're going to start out this program, though, by setting a baseline and then updating regularly so that you can report out to your colleagues or your leadership team or decision makers rather. So when you're updating regularly and reporting out on a regular basis, you want to think about who's your target audience, which you're getting the voice or the input from the people that you're working to serve, the people that you're actually helping, and what their impressions are, what their thoughts are, but you're reporting those inbound to your leadership team or your colleagues or whomever it is you're working with. So also in this report, besides being committed to reporting out on a regular basis, you want to make sure that you're interpreting the results. So what's good, what's bad, what's changing. Usually the changing categories are pretty key because many times in for-profit companies that are committed to customer experience, they're listening to the voice of the customer and they're understanding what's going well, what's not going well. And in areas that are not going well, they're trying to improve their performance. And so how you interpret that with your voice of the served work and how you're going to focus your efforts to get better at what's not going well is usually a pretty important function of a voice of the served program. It's an input to allow you to do better. And so you'll want to set a plan of action, so you understand this or that is not going so well based upon the people that you're working to serve. So what? What are you going to do about that? What are you going to do differently? And that's really what a voice of the served, voice of the customer, that's what all these programs are about. So if you're just starting out, I know this sounds pretty simple, but I would go out there and Google core components of I would Google a voice of the customer program. Forrester probably has some great information out there. There are white papers that you can download. Some of the companies that are in the surveying business or customer relationship management software business, CRM, they may have white papers out there that have been done with experts and that you can perhaps download for free. You probably end up on a marketing list for one of these companies, and that's okay. But if you're really going after this in kind of a guerrilla style customer experience program or a grassroots approach to building your voice of the served program, getting some of these expert reports can be very, very helpful as you think about how you're going to build your program. Beyond Forrester, there's a group out there that I really like. It's called Temkin Group, Bruce Temkin and his team. They publish actually regularly they publish annually on the state of customer programs and specifically looking at voice of customer programs. And once again, you're going to want to translate the ideas here to voice of the served, but you can really learn some great stuff. The last report that I could find from Temkin Group was from this past fall, October 2017, so not quite a year old as I'm recording this. And it's State of Voice of the Customer Programs from Temkin Group, and it says for the seventh straight year, Temkin Group is benchmarking the competency and maturity levels of Voice of Customer or VOC programs in large organizations. So once again, here for Social Impact CX purposes, we're talking about nonprofits that may be large or maybe small or mid-sized, and may have slightly different agendas than large organizations, or you could be a for-profit company with a social purpose. But there's still a lot to learn here. And so, because Temkin Group surveyed 200 large companies, they have a assessment, competency and maturity assessment for voice of customer programs that they have these organizations fill out. And they have 6 Ds as they refer to them: detect, disseminate, diagnose, discuss, design, and deploy. That is a much more formalized program than what I was talking about previously, which is, if you're going to want to do this work, you're going to want to measure consistently with regular frequency and set a baseline and then update regularly and then report out and interpret the results and set an action plan. But Temkin Group has formalized this into their 6 Ds, similar theme or concept of detect, disseminate, diagnose, discuss, design, and deploy. And it's really interesting if you find this report online, which if you Google Temkin Group and State of Voice of the Customer Programs 2017, a couple of their points here, I'll touch on some highlights. While most companies think that their VOC efforts are successful, less than 1/4 of companies consider themselves good at making changes to the business based on the insights. And so, that just goes to show that even the largest organizations that are committed to the customer, they're listening regularly, but the vast majority of them really feel as though they have a ways to go to really changing how they do their business based upon the insights that they're hearing directly from their customers on a regular and consistent basis. Another point here that they make is companies find their VOC programs to be most valuable for identifying and fixing quick hit operational issues and least valuable for identifying innovative products and service ideas. That's a very interesting finding too, even in these large scaled, mature organizations. And when they listen to their customer, they know how to go fix a quick problem that they're hearing directly from their customers, but really taking that input and then coming back into the organization, into the product teams and the service teams and into leadership and saying, this is what we're hearing, what can we do differently in the broader context, not just a quick fix. It's a real challenge. And so this is core to the work of customer experience work, even when your customer is a client or beneficiary or student or patient or whomever that is. This is work that leading large organizations commit themselves to perform better and to do better. Another point here, the most common activity for VOC teams is defining customer experience metrics for their companies, and this activity became even more popular over the past year, which if you've been listening to Social Impact CX podcast back in episode 8, we talked about measuring what matters, and that what matters to you as a nonprofit or social impact organization, social enterprise, is unique to you, and you need to understand your mission and then what you're going to measure to help you understand whether or not you're achieving your mission. So even the largest organizations are doing this, and this goes well beyond just sales metrics and numbers that are produced. This is really how companies are achieving their mission, even in a for-profit context of how they're doing what they're doing and getting better at it. And then another highlight here, only 14% of companies have reached the 2 highest levels of VOC maturity, and Temkin Group offers 6 levels of maturity apparently, and 46% remain in the bottom 2 levels, which, that's very interesting. As I said earlier, or previously, this is an ongoing effort. This is work that really almost never ends, because even if you go back to the world of, if you're familiar with Six Sigma or continuous improvement, you never stop improving. Even when you're great, you can get better. And the best companies really commit to those ideas. And while you may not implement the same formal type structure in a nonprofit or social impact enterprise always, that idea is actually a pretty valuable concept of you can always be improving, especially when you're there to help people. And so you can always help more, ideally. So, one thing that I'll touch on here before moving on to sharing some of what's in my book, or a preview of it rather, is that, the idea of technology is going to pop up here pretty quickly. Don't be afraid of the technology. In fact, I'll be recording a podcast in the future speaking specifically about technology. Technology in measuring voice of the served could be as simple as a email survey, which you can use SurveyMonkey or other programs to do pretty cheap and easy, and it's pretty low tech if you have email or if you have access to different social accounts, different communities. You can gather information from the people that you're serving. If you have the resources and you have the team capabilities, you can also begin to explore fairly advanced packages out there, technology packages from the customer relationship management field and other related fields in terms of how you begin to automate the function of surveying and that online. And that's all great stuff, but if you're not at the level of complexity in your organization to be able to take on these more advanced technology packages, and you're not ready to implement and train and be able to manage the inbound data that you're going to receive, don't worry about it. What's most importantly is that you are focused on gathering that input on a regular basis. Survey tools are a great way to help. They're not the only way. Nothing beats actually sitting with somebody and asking them in person what they're thinking and having those questions that you ask. One of the things I'm going to talk about here is that a voice of the served, a voice of customer program is not necessarily out there asking 50, 70, 80, 100 questions. I think some of the most effective programs I've seen boil it down to a handful of questions, perhaps 10 questions or less, that you can consistently ask, and these are meant to be set so that you don't necessarily change them over time, so you can continue to benchmark effectively period over period. And so if you get down to 5 to 10 questions that really kind of capture the essence of what it is you're trying to achieve with the people that you're serving, that's really going to be a great place to be. So whether it's Forrester or Temkin Group or Gartner Group or others that are out there, there are a lot of resources that have already been established in the field. They're publishing about how you do what you do, and you don't need to spend a lot of money to establish a voice of served program. You can educate yourself on some of the guidelines that are out there by established players, and then begin. And I think the one last point of tips and tricks is it may actually be helpful for you to try this once or twice and see how the inputs come back. And when you first attempt measuring the voice of the served, so that you feel like you get it right. And it's not just your reaction, but also make sure that you share the questions and share the first round of results with your leadership and with your colleagues and others to make sure that you're capturing what's meaningful for them as well too. So that then perhaps you refine or edit once or twice, and then you can set the program and leave it in place so that it can be effectively measured period over period with consistent use of this short but regular set of questions that you're asking. So let me share with you an excerpt from my book that is in development. It's called Mission is the Journey, and there's a whole chapter in there focused on voice of the served. Nothing replaces the actual voice of the customer or the people you are serving. While the for-profit world has built up a whole series of programs and solutions focused on the voice of the customer, nonprofits and social enterprises should understand that they too must always hear the voice of the people they're working to serve. The voice of the people that you're serving should always drive the work that's underway and should hopefully be tied back to measuring how you're attaining mission. If the people you're helping say that you're attaining mission, then you probably are. And if they say you aren't attaining mission, you probably still have work to do. A hot topic in the world of customer experience work is that has specific relevance to nonprofits is the movement to explore VOC, or Voice of the Customer programs, and how important it is to continuously seek and receive input from the customer. This is a discipline that has evolved recently and has direct applications to nonprofits and mission-driven organizations as well, and can be implemented at a very low cost or almost no cost at all. What is a Voice of the Customer program? It's a program to gather input from the customer to better understand what the customer likes or doesn't like, what their preferences are, and what their expectations are. This is accomplished by creating a set of questions that are asked consistently at different points in time across all the channels the organization uses in interacting with its customers or clients. By asking consistent questions, all the responses can be aggregated and measured, and these measurements can be compared over periods of time. And so what is a Voice of the Served program? It's the same idea applied to the needs of a nonprofit and social impact organization. You may want to ask your customers or whomever you're working to serve about different aspects of a transaction. You may want to ask about only business or performance related topics, or there may be a new product or service that you've been creating or an offer that you've had in the market for years that you want to ask about. Or you may want to ask about other factors in their ecosystem, in your ecosystem, other partners, competing organizations, alternative solutions. The key element, though, is that you are developing one set of questions, and that same question is then asked each time. Usually the questions are limited to a small number, fewer than 10, and sometimes only 3 or 4 can be asked across multiple settings. Most organizations don't engage with their clients at just one point in time. You may be engaging with people in the field, where they live, on the telephone, on the internet, You may extend a survey to them in various different locations or channels. Your executive team may be out there talking with people. You may have volunteers in your organization out there talking to people. Each one of these channels forms a touch point with the customer, and at each touch point, those same consistent questions can be deployed. Having a small number of questions allows even your top executives to ask the questions when interacting with the people that you're working to serve. The entire organization can engage in this practice and share feedback with a common understanding of the information being sought. That's why it's helpful to do homework to understand each channel's touch points, the kinds of interactions that they're generally having, and therefore that you can develop the kinds of questions that can be asked to appropriately capture the information that can be gathered in each one of those channels, each one of those scenarios, whether it's online or in person. So if you identify a small set of questions appropriate then to nearly every channel, you'll be ready to ask whenever the opportunity strikes, as well as in planned approaches. If you're trying to initiate a Voice of the Served program within your organization, then you have some bridge building to do. Most likely it's going to be very much worth your while to sit down with the people who are listening to customers and others and that are engaging with the people that you're working to serve every day, to talk with them about trying to involve the entire organization in measuring these voices. This is an opportunity for you to ask your colleagues what's most important to you. What questions should we be asking? How do we understand what people are happy about, what they're not happy about, and what their expectations are, and then collect that information. If you have, say, 3 teams that engage with beneficiaries, clients, or customers, creating the core of the Voice of the Served team, then make sure that each of those 3 teams will be using the same questions consistently, because it's also important that everyone involved commits to a timeline. For example, if you're going to measure twice a year, everyone should share that understanding. You're simply trying to get everybody on the same page. There should also be plenty of opportunities for your colleagues to ask other questions that fall outside of the boundaries of the Voice of the Served program or question set. Customer-facing colleagues should never feel stifled or prevented from asking additional questions of clients, so long as they appreciate the importance of asking the core Voice of the Served questions at a minimum. You're trying to find that middle ground where your colleagues feel they can ask the questions and pursue the interactions they need to for their own purposes, yet are consistently asking the Voice of the Served questions the rest of the organization is asking, so that you can achieve effective measurement and reporting. So that was a bit about Voice of the Served programs that come from the ideas generated around Voice of the Customer programs that have been established and marketed by others. And again, what's great here is that much of the hard work of establishing a key discipline such as Voice of Customer has already been done by innovators in the for-profit sector focused on achieving great customer experience. And with just a bit of effort, those disciplines can be translated into a better fit for the social impact and nonprofit sectors. If you're interested in learning more on the subject, check out Mission is the Journey, which is my book due out later in 2018, where I'll have a whole chapter focused on Voice of the Served. And as I've said before, SocialImpactCX is also intended to become an interactive forum, a place to stir conversation and answer questions, provide some context and definitions, hopefully achieve a better understanding of CX work. So what questions do you have about Voice of the Served or Voice of the Customer, or other topics related to customer experience work overall? You can ask a question at SocialImpactCX a couple different ways. First, you can send an email to comment@socialimpactcx.com. That's comment@SocialImpactCX.com. You can also find us on Twitter and post a question there. Our Twitter handle is @SocialImpactCX. And if you feel so inclined, please include the hashtag SociImpactCX. And please follow us on Twitter to stay up to date with new podcasts and other relevant content. Or if you're listening to this podcast via YouTube, feel free to post a question in the comment section and we'll do our best to catch you there. While at YouTube also, please subscribe to the Social Impact CX channel to stay current on all of our latest videos and audio recordings. This is John Corrigan reminding you that, especially in social impact work, it's important to understand that your mission is really all about someone else's journey. And the more you know about someone's journey, the more you can help. Thanks for listening to Social Impact CX.